Hey everyone, I'm Matt Cremona.
And I'm Matthew Morris, and today on the Matt and Matthew Show we have a special guest. We have Joseph Thompson from Joseph Thompson Woodworks. Joseph, thank you so much for being on the show today. You build and design furniture for a living. How did you get started in woodworking?
I started woodworking with traditional sailboats. I went to British Columbia out of 2 years out of college, or 2 years into college. I left college and went to study at a small wooden boat building school in British Columbia, and wanted to learn traditional boat building. And that was Silva Bay Shipyard School in Gabriola Island, British Columbia. And part of the school was ship's cabinetry and fine furniture, along with the traditional boat building, and that really kicked it off. I'll be honest, I hadn't built a thing before I went there. I tell people I'd built Legos, and that was really all. All my experience was possibly doing a few refinishing jobs for myself, really just taking apart chairs and seeing how they were built. And I had an idea, that was something I'd be interested in, and it definitely was. As soon as I went, it was just kind of pedal to the metal from there. After the boat building, I knew I was going to come back to South Carolina, and the wooden boat building community isn't very strong here. So it was either going to be stay in the Northwest, which would have been great too, or Northeast. Or since I knew I was probably going to be coming home, I thought maybe the furniture would be more of a route that I could capitalize on, and also not have to have a team of guys, could kind of be in the shop by myself. And so that was really a big draw for, not only did I really like the kind of individual pieces, with the boat building, you could kind of, it wasn't a large boat, it's kind of a day sailor, but there were individual components to the boat that, that I could really focus on, and that kind of reminded me, or kind of what I thought the furniture would be like, and and being able to design and build my own pieces, really was a lot of interest to me. I didn't think that I was going to be designing any boats, so I don't know if it was, if I felt like I was, going to be cutting a little corner, or just being able to do my own thing. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what it turned into. And once I came back, I had a client that was a kind of a family friend, and got a job for a piece of furniture, and I've been going, doing the same thing ever since.
That's awesome. So at the school, so obviously it was a boat building school, but you did fine furniture there as well. How a boat construction is obviously different than building a piece of furniture, something that large. Is there anything that you think you learned from there that changed the way you build furniture versus maybe somebody who went to a more traditional route, as far as going to like College of the Redwoods, or one of those other types of more furniture specific schools versus both furniture and boat building?
I definitely think it was an advantage, or it's worked out for me. I did, later on I did go to CFC, the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, for some more accelerated, or more, really got into some of the finer work, where this boat building school was really my introduction. And I really think that the boat building, I'm not intimidated by curves or because if I had to go back and build boats now, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure I didn't absorb all there was to, obviously not all there was to know, but even what I actually did, I'm not sure I quite understood it all the way. But I think as far as having the confidence, I felt like I could build anything after that, and I'm sure that was, a lot of that was, being naive, and but that was okay. I didn't have, because when I came home, I think I went right into building. I built a bed my first commission, but not long after that, I started building chairs, and I'm sure a lot of people are hesitant to start or to build chairs for one reason or the other, and I never had that hesitancy, and I probably should have had a little bit more, but I'm glad I didn't, because chairs are probably my favorite thing to build, and I feel like the complexity of boat building and even as far as the complexity of boat building, as far as being confident to tackle any challenge, and I think being able to adapt and actually to make jigs and things like that, I think the boat building really helped.
So the chairs thing, I've noticed, well, we follow each other on Instagram, and I've seen your chairs, and I love building chairs personally. There's just something about the complexity to the whole thing, the angles, making sure it's at the right height, if you have enough padding, or if you're carving the seat. There's just really a lot of fun to build. Obviously, I'm doing something a little bit different. I do a lot of green and green stuff, but so you have some really awesome chairs. Where did those designs for the chairs that you build, and I would say some of them are even, that one at the back, that one that you just did a miniature of recently, that to me feels like it's like your signature chair. Where did that come from?
I guess it comes from wherever we all pull our designs from. They're probably a culmination of everything we've, all the chairs we've all admired, and I'm sure, I feel like every chair I've looked at has had, an influence in my design. If I had to, I don't know, I'm looking at it right now off to the side. I'm not sure if I could pick one thing that inspired me, or where I drew inspiration from. That chair design originated off of my first project at Center for Furniture Craftsmanship. It was a dovetail and mortise and tenon exercise, and I wanted to build a stool, and that stool kind of became that chair. It just, at first it was just, the front two legs were compound angled mortise and tenon, which took care of that part of the project, and then the back leg is a single back leg, dovetailed, at an angle to the back of the seat, and then that chair design, kind of grew from that, with a back and some different shaping, but that chair. I would say it kind of has some Danish influence, has some Japanese influence, has some early American influence. You could probably you could call it a lot of things. I like it.
What's your favorite part about building chairs?
Definitely the challenge of trying to make something. First off, making something that has to fit the human body, and I think that's where the real challenge is. One of the challenges. There are many, as you know. Everybody's different, so one person might sit in a chair and then the next, or might think it's comfortable, and the next it might not hit in the right spot. And to me, that's awesome. I love that you have to design a chair, for an individual, and no wonder most chairs aren't comfortable with people, because they're kind of a general, not everybody's the same size. So I think that I love to make custom chairs, and figuring out how someone likes to sit. When I first approach or a customer approaches me, seriously about making a custom chair, I will observe them sit in a chair that they normally sit in, and kind of see how are they someone that sits, kind of leans back, or are they someone who likes arms, or or do they kind of spread out when they sit, or there's so many things. And then to take that and make something that to make a chair that not only looks good, but then can take all that punishment that all chairs do. I don't know what it is about chairs, but we love to torture them. Whether it's leaning back or kicking the legs, or it's to make one that's strong and that lasts and is also comfortable and also nice to look at I think is really challenging, and I think that's the biggest draw in chair making for me.
Now, for when you're doing the bends and the curves in your chairs, are you doing bent laminations? Are you steam bending? Are you shaping, cutting out from a larger piece, and then template routing?
There's a combination of maybe not in that particular chair you were speaking of. I take that as I decide that pretty much case by case. I'll toil all over those decisions for a long time. What's the most practical? And it always comes down to what I feel is the best decision. Whether it's going to be the fastest or not. I want to make something. I want that. That the decision of how to build something, and how that curve is going to be made, whether it's bent lamination or steam. I always try to make it with the best interest of the chair in mind. I know that might sound weird, but I really that's really important to me. Also aesthetics definitely have to play a role in that. But if are you familiar maybe with that rocking stool that I did? We call it the perch, but that's definitely a bent lamination. The rockers are bent laminated, and the reason I chose that, it was a really tight bend, and I definitely think that it could have been pulled off with steam bending for sure. Maybe with a little more practice. I have had some steam bending experience with the boat building, and also with some of the with the chair building, but some of the thick bends I haven't had a whole lot of experience with. So I definitely, with that chair, I really needed for those to be exact copies. They had to be a matching pair, and I felt like I could guarantee that a little bit more with a bent lamination. Whether the steam bending would have probably worked, but how many I would have had to bend to get it, I'm not sure. And I could predict the spring back. I could personally predict the spring back more accurately with the bent lamination, with my experience. So maybe I could have, with a little more experience, could have had a better idea with the steam bending. But for that particular design, that worked out well. It needed to be really strong and without perfect grain orientation with a steam bend, I could do that with the bent lamination, and guarantee a perfect mirror image, or it wouldn't have rocked correctly for sure.
Yeah, it's important. But I'm in the middle of that right now. I'm working on this Gamble House living room, the rocker chair in the living room. Mm-hmm. And it was funny, you were talking about the shapes and sizes of people. I went and visited the Gamble House, and they were kind enough to let me actually sit in some of the furniture. And my knees came up so high in the rocking chair when I sat in it that it was uncomfortable. But the people then, the Mr. Gamble, he was 5'2", his wife was 4'10". Wow. And so the piece was built for them, size-wise.
Right.
So it kind of comes back, what you're talking about right now is you're watching the person, you're taking observations, and you're building something that's just for them, which is really, it's what's so fun about woodworking for us, is that we can do stuff like that. We're not just going to design within reach and picking a chair off the floor.
Because it could fit, but chances are it's not going to fit right, and how long are you going to be comfortable in that chair? And so many, again, that's, I think, the draw for making chairs is just it feels like a never-ending puzzle and a challenge that not only the build, but for that particular person, there's so many little nuances, and just like I said, and everybody sits different, and trying to figure that out. I mean, how you sit in a chair hundreds of times while you're making it, with just little differences, and trying to you can figure out if you've got the right pitch. And it's funny, the first chair that I designed at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, after that stool, I can remember my teacher Tim Rousseau was telling me, I took the 12-week intensive, and it was, the last couple of weeks we had our bending, it could have been our last project, and I chose to do just prototyping a chair, and mostly it was 2x4s and things like that. But the process of prototyping, I remember him telling me that can be months long, and I can remember thinking, golly, that's pretty excessive, or not excessive, but that's how do you make that work? But it takes that to make a chair correctly, and at least initially. So, and for me, I ended up, I think the way it seems now, every time I do a chair, it's the first time I've done one. So unfortunately, it seems like a prototype every time. So monetarily, that doesn't work out so great. But that's something that, hopefully you get enough people that like what you're doing, that you've got those templates, and you can continue to make them. But when you're making one-offs, man, it's a lot of time into them, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge, and I think I mentioned some of the hesitancy for people to build chairs, and that's got to be one too. I mean, there's a lot of time invested in that design, and if you're only talking about one, you're not likely gonna get your money back out of that first chair, to be completely honest. But man, it's fun, and it's rewarding, and it can be very frustrating too, just like any kind of woodworking can be when you're trying to figure things out. But it can be really rewarding, and it's very rewarding to see that client sit in it the first time, and to watch them, just to watch their body actually sit in it and sit, with their spine and the right, the right angles and, in a kind of a relaxed, it's funny. I'll look at their face and their reaction, but you can almost just tell by their body language if you've nailed it or not. And you don't always, but hopefully the more you do them, the more you get it right. And it's definitely a win when that happens. And
yeah, totally. For me, I don't sell as much as I used to because I'm doing the video stuff. But when someone come in and sit in something that I've built chair-wise, or anything else, but definitely chairs, I almost don't want to give them the piece. You put so much into it. The last thing I want to do is have them walk away with them. Like, why don't you come and visit it every once in a while and just pay me to visit it?
Right? I know that feeling.
I mean, I'll sit in something for an hour or two just after I finished it, just to try to remember what it felt like to sit in that piece.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will definitely, and that's, I think that's important, because there's so, you could sit in something for a short period of time and it feels one way, and then you sit in it for an extended period of time and it'll feel a different way. But once you've made it and it's gone, then it's gone. And you might have a mock-up, but that's probably been sent to the burn pile at that point, and it's not exactly the same. And that's another challenge with it. If you're doing an upholstered seat, you have to, it has to be the same thickness as your prototype for it to translate. I might make a prototype with a MDF seat or something that's going to be a carved seat, and it's a matter of fractions of an inch that in pitch and depth and all the things that I think it's worth sitting in it for a few hours to remember it, and whether you can remember it right, that's a challenge in itself. So I try to document it absolutely as much as I can. Whether a 3D scanner would be nice on a carved seat, I don't know. That would be a plus to be able to map it out. But it would be different the next time anyway. Let's face it. If you're doing it by hand, there would be some discrepancy.
So Joseph, just changing gears a little bit here. I know one topic that everyone's really interested in, especially when we talk to people that are doing this professionally, is how do you run your business and how do you do your marketing? So would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
I need Katie up here for marketing. I'll tell you, before Katie joined the team, I was in my parents' barn building with absolutely, first of all, no website, no social media at all. I didn't answer emails, nothing. It wouldn't be a business without her. But and she's totally in control of that part. I'm like, how much do we charge for that, Katie? Okay.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, but isn't that the story? Like, if you read Sam Malouf's, the biography of Sam Malouf, the same thing for him. He built and the wife ran the business. Both of them. He didn't really start making money until he married the second wife, and then that's when she started charging $25,000 for a rocking chair.
I don't know how people do it on their own. Do all the marketing, that was my concern. Is like how can I mean, nothing's getting built if I'm not in the shop. How can I take all that time to do this marketing? That's kind of silly, obviously, but that was still a question, and it's like I can't do it all. And for the guys that do it all themselves, I mean, I don't know how they do it. I mean, I couldn't. It would not be a business without Katie. Absolutely. I mean, because first of all, I'm not great at that kind of stuff. I'm not. I mean, I didn't put the battery in the microphone. That kind of. I'm not good with a computer, and but I try. And Instagram has really been my first social media at all. Before that, I wouldn't get on the computer. But I don't know how, if it wasn't for Katie and bringing, just putting me in front of people, like I said, I'd be in the barn by myself working still probably. So, yeah, it definitely takes a team. Especially, at least for us, unless that's, some people that are, that kind of, that minded, I envy it, because I don't have it. So.
Now your Instagram is actually pretty remarkable. It's how I found you. It's probably how Matthew found you as well. And I know you've been obviously really successful there, and you have a lot of followers and a lot of people watching your work and commenting and interacting, which is awesome. And I guess part of what we're kind of trying to figure out here is, do you get a lot of commissions and actual business from that, or is it more people watching you and being inspired by what you're doing, like other woodworkers, or is it a combination of both?
I definitely say more woodworkers. I've had some classes that have come from some of my Instagram followers, but mostly it's the kind of the community, which I'll tell you has been it's been wonderful though. I think especially for someone getting into woodworking, I know I've recommended it to a lot of people, but especially some guys that have had a chance to speak at a few woodworkers clubs, and and a lot of it are older guys, and I'm like, I'll tell them about it, and I'm like, I know that's probably it's surprising that some of them are interested, but mostly some of the younger guys, I'm like, get on Instagram and check it out, because I know when I first started, I felt like I was I was in the shop by myself, but I felt like I was pretty alone, where I had to, I felt like I had to reinvent the wheel all the time, and having that resource now where you can pretty much anything you want to know, and most people on there are are willing to share their knowledge, and that's awesome. And so my one thing that first, I tell you, when I first got on it, Katie set up the account, and would post pictures when she was in the shop, and she's like, I think you'd like it, and I was like, I don't know, but I decided to take, she's like, here, you take it over, and I just had so much fun with it. I was like, first I was like, I'm promote it, and hopefully I'll get some business. I have no idea how this thing works. It was really, I wasn't on Facebook or Twitter or anything, and I was like, this is cool, it's just pictures. And then I started seeing just the dialogue between woodworkers, and the amount of knowledge that all of us were willing to share, and it really kind of just took off from there. As far as the followers, and which has been great. Like it hadn't been a huge boost for actually sales for the pieces, but what I've got out of it with I've made a lot of first of all a lot of friends, but a lot of contacts with just a wealth of knowledge that I didn't feel like I had access to, which I probably did, but like I said, I didn't get on the computer. But it's different. I can actually ask, if anything that comes, any issue comes up, there's somebody I can think of who's pretty much an expert or has had a lot of experience with that particular problem, who will will answer and get back, and or at least the feedback. Just having a place to bounce ideas off of when you're by yourself. I think that's one of the most frustrating things about getting started and, not knowing the right way to do, the right way. There's no right way, but maybe some of the proper ways to do things. And like I said, where you felt like you had to reinvent everything every time. That's been awesome, and to be able to give that to somebody else has probably been, or be able to help someone and not have to struggle on something for a week, just figuring out a problem, where I did that many times when I was first started. That if I could help somebody do that, then that brings me a lot of joy. And that's, which that kind of led into teaching a little bit. I didn't teach before, the order of those were started Instagram and then started teaching, whatever that means. But I think it had something to do with it. And I always thought I'd enjoy teaching, and that kind of, I don't know if that opened up some doors, but it kind of put me in that mentality where, I could offer advice if I had it, and or if I just, if they were asking an opinion, I could give them what I felt like was a pretty educated opinion, and that's a great thing, I think. So it's been good for nothing. If nothing else, it's been good for that. But you never know. You never know who's gonna place an order. So I'm still holding out.
Yeah, the Instagram thing's really been great. It's a great sense of community. Mm-hmm. It's just really, and it's fun watching other people's work. It's like you said, I know, like Matt and I found each other on Instagram that way. But we're in the shops, we're trying to knock our stuff out, and it's not like there's two woodworkers down the street and then another one across the street from you. So it's made the world a lot smaller.
Absolutely. I didn't know one other person doing what I was doing, and that was probably one of the biggest surprises. It was like, wow, when I got on Instagram, it was just like, man, there's all these people doing, they're doing the same thing, or they're trying to get into doing the same thing, and I don't know, that was really neat. I had some friends that were students when I was a student. That was pretty much the only resources I had to pull. When I had a question, I could call them. But other than that, it was reading books and just failing. So that's definitely been the biggest teacher, was just making mistakes. So. And you still, the Instagram hadn't taken away any of the mistakes. It just, well, maybe it's made made them a few less. But
so Joseph, why don't you tell us about your classes you offer? I think that's a really neat thing. Is that something you do there in your shop as well?
The way I started it was basically an introduction into woodworking, and that's I can't handle but about, at a max, about 4 or 5 people at a time, just with the size of the shop and number of benches and things like that. But a lot of them have been more one-on-one classes. But like I said, I start with an introduction into woodworking, or introduction into hand tools, because I find that's kind of, there are people that are wanting to get into woodworking, but I'm not. Letting somebody on the table saw to start off with, I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in it's been easy, because that's usually what people are asking for, is the more into the hand tool work. So with the introduction into hand tools, I feel like most of the day we learn how to sharpen, and that was always a frustrating way to start for me, but it's been interesting and nice to see most of my students have been very willing and eager to learn that, and I think because I really push on the importance that it all starts with that. I mean, the sharpening, and and then then we get into doing just several hand cut joints, whether it's a cutting a lap joint with with a handsaw and chisels, and a Morrison tenon, and depending on the student, whether we get into dovetails or not. But then also, there's a kind of more of an advanced joinery class that I offer, and that definitely would. And most of the time it's case by case, where the student is, what they're interested in, what projects they may have in mind, how far they're really interested in pushing themselves, or how much experience they've had, and a dovetail might be advanced for them, and not that it isn't, because it's I didn't mean to anyway, but it really can go it can go as far as they want, going into totally hidden dovetail joints, or compound angled mortise and tenons and things like that. But really try to focus on what that particular student is looking to learn, and then of course, really, how to use chisels properly, and how to work smart and try to work efficiently, and and then also, with the hand planes, usually that's I know from my experience, the first time I picked up a hand plane, it was, you take it and you gouge it into the wood, and most of the time you've worked on a project and you're like, all right, I want to figure out how this hand plane works, and then you gouge it into the wood and you put it aside and you grab your sander, and until you remember that, and I really in the last few years, I say the last few years, I know it feels like when you get better at something that you've just figured something out for the first time again, but I feel like in the last few years I've gotten pretty in tune with my hand planes and with my chisels, and on a different level than I have before, and hopefully that continues. That hopefully one day I'll look back and think I knew nothing now. So I hope so. But that has been one of the biggest, besides the joinery, the hand cut joinery, that kind of demystifying hand planes has been a big interest in my students, and that's really rewarding, seeing them use that for the first time properly, and it actually doing what they're asking it to do. It still surprises me and gives me a lot of joy every time it actually works out. Where you can finish right off the plane. I always thought that was kind of a joke, that you really couldn't do that, but turns out you can, and it just takes a lot of practice. So that's been one of the, I think that's been probably one of the neatest things to see in my classes is the students being able to use those hand planes and getting starting to not rely so much on sandpaper, and I think that's really cool. But,
So what helped you make that jump? Was it just, as you just said, was it just practice, or was it just more of a concentrated effort or desire to get better, or it was just experience? Or
well, I think everything, all of those. I think it certainly wasn't. I don't know if I really ever had a eureka moment with it. I think that. Whether it was whether it was a kind of a self-reflection on some of my earlier work, that maybe maybe that's not crisp enough, or I could have done better, or I'll call I'll call something that and I don't mean to offend anybody, or because I'm certainly not trying to. I'll kind of calling myself out, but like something that's doughy, like you just kind of have rounded things over, and that's fine if that's the look you're going for, because you can intentionally do it properly. But you know what I mean. Like if something needs to be crisp, then it needs to be crisp. And like, I think it was a desire to just do better work. And I'm like, well, to do better work, I need to make these planes work better. And to make these planes work better, I need to figure out sharpening. And, and I think that was really a drive, and that, that desire there was work that I couldn't do on machines that I knew were possible with hand tools, but to pull it off correctly, there was that learning curve. And, maybe not having a girlfriend, being in the shop, and being totally dedicated to woodworking. Not that I would recommend that, but I think that probably had a little bit to do with it. I'm kidding, not really, but yeah. There was that desire to really do my best work, I think, fueled that. And when you start to see those results, that just fuels it even more. And then you know how it is though. I mean, you'll figure something out, and then you get comfortable, or either you think you got it, and then you realize that, man, I need to sharpen more than once a month, and then now I'm, or something like that, where I'm a fanatic now, where I sharpen, several times throughout the process. I mean, like I've gotten now to where, if it's not giving me the not perfect result, because I don't know what that is, but the result that I'm aiming for, then I stop and I sharpen to get that result. Where in the past I wouldn't have. I'd have just worked, I would have pushed harder, and physically, and figuring those things out, that you don't, that taking the time to sharpen only makes things go faster, for lots of reasons, because the results are better, that the effort is less, and the reward is there too, because I mean the work is just that at a little bit higher level, and plus making the tool do what you ask it to do is probably one of the coolest things that that happens in the shop, when you can ask it to do something and it delivers because you've got it right.
So what's your sharpening method, Joseph? I know everybody's got a different thing. Like Brian Boggs, freehands with diamond paste, and so are you using stones? Are you using paper? Are you leather stroping? Or
I learned on Waterstones when I was at boat building school. When I went to the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, I had Adrian Ferrazzuti was a teacher of mine for one of the parts, and he's a College of the Redwoods graduate, and I spent a lot of time with him and watching him sharpen. And before I did that, I was sharpening on the stone with a honing guide. I wasn't very confident on a grinder, so I was just strictly stone, honing guide on stones. And when I spent more time with him, he would freehand on the grinder, hollow grind, freehand on the stone. And I would recommend people trying, if they've got the will to practice that, to give it a shot. There's a learning curve with it. There's a learning curve with the grinder in itself, but I have found that I've got my best results have been from a hollow grind and sharp, and then to Waterstones. Of course, my initial flattening, to me, and some of that being said, I don't care how you get there. I mean, I know plenty of people who, like I said, that do paper, or that sharpen on diamond stones or diamond paste, and or to me, it's just it doesn't matter how you get there, and that's kind of a theme that goes with all the work. It's it doesn't really matter how you get there, but as long as you get the right result. For me, I flatten on whatever it takes to get that initial flattening, whether it be sandpaper, then onto stones, or a diamond plate, or a diamond stone onto sharpening stones. But my method, once I've got that back done, is to hollow grind, then to take it, and then to take my tool straight to my stone, probably at 8,000, and I sharpen up to 16,000. I have the Shapton glass stones. That just happens to be what I'm using right now. I started with king stones, and I like those. Then went to Norton stones, and Shapton or what I use now. And I can get incredibly fast results because I have learned to grind efficiently, where I can take my bevel straight to the stone, and I can ride the bevel freehand on my stone and get my results in 5 minutes at least, or at the most. I personally don't use a strop because I can have my 16,000 stone at my bench the same way as you would use a strop. I have nothing against a strop at all. I personally don't have a strop that I feel is hard enough. So I think my results from strop have been that kind of rounded over strop action. That, like I said, that's operator error. That's not what I'm looking for, because I want to be able to go right back to my stone and get those repeatable, ride my bevel off that hollow grind and be able to touch it up. And once I've rounded it over, however I've rounded it over, whether I've rounded it over on a stone or that strop, I've kind of ruined that. It could be a matter of my strop being not the right kind of strop, because obviously you can get a incredibly sharp edge off a strop. It's just not my method.
I had a question on here, and maybe it's a good roundup for this part of the episode, which was if you were to give a younger you advice from what you've learned so far in this point of your woodworking life, what would that advice be?
I have to share the advice I was given when I was at boat school. There was an old native. I don't know. I'm not sure if he was First Nations or what it was when in British Columbia, but he was a totem carver, and he had a shop on the beach in British Columbia. And I told him I wanted to build furniture for a living. And at the time, my father was with me on a trip out there to see me launch my boat. And so he was there, and I'm not sure if this was specific to him seeing my father there and knowing that he was supportive of me. But his advice to me was, if I wanted to be a furniture maker, was to learn to live with little and to stay friends with my father. So I've always remembered that, and I know that I really appreciate it, and I know that isn't going to work for everybody, but for me it was very true. My parents have been a big support for me. Like I told you, I left traditional college after 2 years and went to build sailboats. Their reaction was very supportive. They were about the only people that were supportive. Most people thought that I'd lost my mind. They're like, "You're going to do what?" And when I got back, it was a different story. There was, oh, that's I wish I'd have done that, or that kind of thing. But they were always very supportive, and I think having that, whatever your support system is, whether it's not everybody's going to be their parents, or and to whatever degree that may be, just having just support for what you're doing is important. Whether there's any monetary support or not, and that's not even what I'm talking about. But I think that's important. So I'll never forget that advice. But I also would have to say, just be willing to fail. And make mistakes. And I think that's, I know that could be a little cliche, but because everybody makes mistakes, but you learn so much from them, and I think they make you be ready for the challenges, and to accept that if you can work on something for, I think a lot of people, I don't want to sound like somebody old right now, just like these kids these days type thing, but most people aren't willing, don't have any idea about work. I will say it. I said it. But don't have any idea about working on something for weeks at a time, or not whether I'm weeks or days or months or several months to have something fail. Get ready for it, because it happens, and you just start over, and you build again, and be ready to make mistakes and to fail. I think that has to be my advice. I mean, because to say it's not going to happen is a joke, because it's going to happen, and it'll make you a better woodworker. So there you go.
Awesome. Now, this is something we've never done before, guys, which is we've only done 7 or 8 episodes, right, Matt?
This is 8. 8.
Yeah. So, but we're gonna do a 2-parter here. Where this first part, Joseph has been nice enough to spend time with us talking about woodworking, and he's graciously allowed us to do another episode, and we're just gonna kind of check out a shop a little bit and give you guys hopefully a little tour, or he'll give us a little tour. But Joseph, I had a blast. I had a lot of fun. How about you, Matt?
Samesies.
And how about you, Joseph?
It's been a blast. I'm looking at Matt over there he's got a party hat on. I mean, I didn't get one in my care package.
Oh, that's right here.
I didn't get a hat either. Matt, where's my hat?
He's got a
hat. Matt, where can they find you?
You can find me and everything I do at my website. That's at mattcremona.com.
And I'm at mmwoodstudio.com. And Joseph, if people want to learn about your work, follow you on Instagram, and check out, or even take a class from you if they're in the Charleston area, how can they find you?
They can find me at JWT Woodworks on Instagram, and jwtwoodworks.com. This is my website. And you can find me. You'll probably be speaking with my wife first if you're emailing, but she's half the team here too. So, well, please call and give us a shot.
Awesome. So as always, guys, please subscribe to the channel. It's really appreciated. Share it with your friends. And until next time, in 2 weeks from now, we'll have a tour of Joseph's shop. So until then, thanks so much, Matt.
See ya.
He has too much fun.